Hi, I'm Joel Axler, a city boy who moved to Walkerton 20 years ago, and I stayed. In addition to the natural beauty here and the inexpensive cost of living, I discovered some pretty interesting people. This show dives beneath the surface of some fascinating characters, and you'll be amazed at their hobbies, contributions, and vocations. This show is called It's All About You. That is the interesting people we're about to meet and explore. On this episode of It's All About You, we're here with Steve Santini, collector, archivist. We're here in the Midnight Museum of Steve Santini's artifacts and historic collection of torture devices. Steve, why don't you just start and tell us where you want to go?
Well, this is a very unusual part of the house. It tends to scare away most people, but there's no reason for it really. Many years ago, I was a professional escape artist, and I used to travel the world breaking out of jails and cuffs and locks and all that, the whole Houdini thing. And over time, I started to research the justice traditions that were attached to the old restraints I was breaking out of. And I became a historian on the antique punishments and what was done back in the good old days. And be careful what you wish for, because once you start collecting, you can't stop. And this room is full of hundreds of objects going back to the 1400s, through the great periods of the European witch hunts, even things from Salem. We have all sorts of criminal punishment elements here in this room, and it's quite the collection.
So Steve, while we're here, why don't you just point to a couple of things of your interest? We have innumerable cases and things to put on people's skulls, and I mean, there's a museum worth of artifacts and devices in here.
Yeah, there is. This is the sort of place that literally, to see these sorts of things, you'd have to travel across Europe.
Yeah.
I mean, it's loaded with all sorts of things. Right here we have a chair from Germany from the 1600s with attached manacles. And this was used, this chair, in the witchcraft trials that they had in Europe. And people know about Salem, a few people perished there. Well, not a few, 19 people perished. But in Germany, there were literally 20, 30, 40, 50,000 people vanquished as witches when they were innocent.
Wow.
And so this chair they would sit in the courtroom while judgment was being pronounced on them, locked into this chair.
Locked into that chair.
It's quite the thing. Yeah.
Wow.
Now the masks,
Yes.
the place is full of these iron masks. And these masks are very interesting because back in the day you lived in smaller villages and towns, and you couldn't be physically harming people for breaking minor laws.
Right.
So what they would do is they came up with masks that would shame these people. For instance, if you went through somebody's garbage on the street, you're behaving like a dog.
So you'd wear the dog mask.
You'd wear the dog mask for a week, and trying to eat and sleep wearing this ridiculous mask.
But you had to sleep in it?
Oh yeah, for a week they wouldn't take it off.
Oh, because it was locked. Oh,
yeah, you had to walk the streets and people would mock you. Beside it is a wild boar.
Right.
And that mask would be, say, for a very large man that had starved his wife and children. He hoarded all the food for himself. So suddenly, he has to wear the mask of the swine. All sorts of things. This one with a long tube is for people that whispered gossip. Some of them have giant ears for people that hear other people's business. So since you lived in such a small, tight-knit community, once you wear one of these, people will never let you forget it.
No, that would be on your CV for sure. Now this device here, it's
amazing.
a double arm and double head thing. Could you talk about that for a second?
Yeah, that's a type of pillory where they would lock your neck into the larger holes at either end, and then your hands would go in front of you into these smaller holes here.
Right.
And what it was for quarreling women. You couldn't have discord in the streets, so what they do is if two women were arguing in the market or the village, they'd put one neck in here, the lady's hands in here,
and the other one there, and the other two hands.
So they had to face each other until they worked it out.
Until they worked it out.
And only then would they be released from this.
Wow. Now these masks on this side.
Yeah.
Talk about these.
Well, once again, you have a few. This is for somebody that would talk out of turn or spread gossip again.
Oh,
You've
with
got
the tongue.
The flowing tongue.
Wow.
This one, though, is really disturbing.
Oh.
It has screws that are going into the eyes. And honestly, I don't believe it was ever used. I think that this might have been a device to terrify criminals into confessing.
Right.
Like, I mean, all they had to do is look at this, and you're like,
this
hey,
is in your future.
Hey, I did it twice a week. I did it.
Yeah, for sure.
So, this, I think a lot of the most atrocious, horrific torture instruments were never used. They merely were created
Shown.
to terrify people. Yeah, show the person, and then they have a change of heart.
Right.
This is amazing here. We've assembled with authentic objects from the 1600s a European witch hunter's or witch finder's desk. This
Right.
is the type of desk that the magistrate would have sat at when interrogating a witch or pronouncing sentence.
And so the date on this book volume is 15.
Yes, it's amazing, isn't it?
1593.
Correct.
And ancient 1593, and it's all in Latin, obviously.
Yes, and it's a book on, if you see here, my Latin's terrible.
Mine's good.
But Questionamium
Yeah.
Criminalum. So this is a book basically, and it goes through here. This is the word torture.
Okay.
It goes through all the things you could legally do under the law.
So it's 100 years after the Spanish Inquisition.
Yep.
And basically it is the Inquisition handbook.
Pretty much. Mind you, the Inquisition, they took care of heretics and did away with them. But the witch hunts were worse, way worse, that came later. So it's an interesting thing. It has all the exact things on it that were used.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's incredible. It's just, here we have, this is an executioner's axe from Germany.
Wow.
This dates to the late 1800s, and the executioners would wear top hat and tails when they used this in Germany back then. We have the
Top hat
white
and
gloves.
tails.
Yeah, you can see in this illustration.
So they didn't have a hood on their head.
No.
Like in the movies.
Right,
They
and
had a top hat and tails, and just like in that,
Yeah, just
like in that drawing.
exactly. So we have one of the executioner's top hats. We have his gloves. We have his tobacco box, his snuff box.
So it was a formal affair.
A formal affair.
A formal affair.
Yes, that nobody ever went back to.
Really?
But it's a remarkable piece because with the scrap metal drives of the First and Second World War,
Right.
a lot of these rare pieces were
melted.
destroyed.
Yeah,
They were melted down.
Right.
So it's really incredible. I mean, here we have a guillotine model that was made by a condemned guy that was actually waiting for the guillotine in France.
And he made that model in jail.
He made that model in jail. I mean, I think
So
you
that's
have
not to chop cigar ends off. That's a real model of a real guillotine.
Yeah, absolutely. Or what he envisioned it to be. Here's an interesting piece. It's called the Pair of Anguish. And the way that these work is you screw this thing and then the pieces come together.
Yeah.
And various books have said that these are for horrific purposes. Not really. All it is, it's an expandable mouth gag.
Oh.
So if you had somebody in the courtroom and you're
Yeah.
about to pronounce sentence, you don't want them passing a curse on the court or whatever, you just plop this into their mouth and adjust it so it's open. We need this for politicians, don't we?
Yes, we do.
Yeah, we do.
Yes.
So it's pretty remarkable. There's everything here. Like this is an old carved wood panel.
That's a beautiful carved wood panel.
It is, and it's from the 1600s.
It's from the 1600s.
It's carved in solid oak, and this shows Lady Justitia.
Yes.
Which in
the
Germany
scales
she
in
was.
one hand and the sword in the other. That's
Interesting, isn't it, that she's not blindfolded?
right. Oh, she's not. That's right.
She's not, and I'm not sure if that was an American concoction later on.
I think it was, yeah.
But this is the way she originally appeared to the Germanic people.
Right. And moving right along, behind you.
Yes.
Let's have a look at what's behind you.
Well, up here, this would have been a parade standard that was carried
yes.
on a pole.
Right.
And we have those that were carried to the sites of witch persecutions, but this would have been carried by a group like an inquisitor and so forth.
Oh my.
You know, lots of regalia.
Right.
And it's funny, you mentioned earlier executioner hoods and masks.
Yes.
This is an executioner mask, and we've had the fabric here replaced, but it is a myth. They never wore masks or hoods while doing executions. All
Okay.
those things we see in the movies are
That's
rubbish.
all? Okay.
Yeah, and the reason that we see that in mythology is to give them a more menacing look.
Right.
What they would occasionally do in Europe is they would have a mask made up. They believed when a person was executed, there was a bad spirit in that person that made them a criminal.
right.
They believed the bad spirit would rush out of the
Rise.
body
Yeah.
and infest the first body it saw,
Which
would be the executioner.
Right.
So occasionally, following an execution, he'd plop that on just for his own protection. But not to instill fear, because really you couldn't work your tools with a mask or a hood on you.
and not to be anonymous because it didn't matter.
Right,
Right.
exactly.
Okay. Now that mask up there, that's interesting. What is that?
That's another type of shame mask.
Oh, okay.
It's interesting. We can only guess that by the shape of the mouth, you've got somebody that's perhaps making too much noise, disturbing the peace. because they're always yelling, and they'd have to wear that as a punishment for being loud. Yeah.
And in this chair, who is this nice fellow here in the painting?
This is a depiction, we don't know his name, but this is a depiction of what the witchcraft persecutors or prosecutors looked like back in the 1600s in Germany.
Right.
This comes from around the Würzburg region of Germany, and they had a huge number of witch trials. Wow. Yeah, so this guy looks quite stern. He's pointing at the book, this is the law, and it's amazing. I wish we knew more about who that was.
Yeah. And the handcuffs, there's so many here, and in the museum collection here.
Yeah, the handcuffs come from my days being an escape artist.
Oh, I see. Okay.
When I started out doing escapology, and if I could get out of an old cuff, if somebody brought one to my show saying, "Get out of this, my grandpa had this thing," I would get to keep it. I'd make them a deal. If I couldn't get out of the cuff, I'll give you $100. If I can escape it, I get to keep it. So I built this big collection off of doing that.
How many moments did you have when you were doing escape work where you thought, okay, this is it, I'm not going to make it?
I had two of them. It was about 1,000,000 years ago. It was 1982. They hired me for Canada Day celebration, so I'm going to do this upside down straitjacket from a crane.
37 years ago, you're going to do an upside down what?
Get out of a straitjacket hanging upside down from this crane 100 feet off the ground.
Okay.
I was living in Collingwood at the time. The guy that was working with me, we came out to Kelso Beach, and the crane was set up. All the people are there. We realized that we forgot the ankle straps back where I lived in Collingwood. There was no time to go back and get them. So we went to downtown Owen Sound to a hardware store, and they had some horse tack there.
Yeah.
So we got these two straps, and this piece of chain, and linked them together. And I'm getting hauled up, and I'm about 60 feet in the air, still going up, and I hear this pow sound, and the rivet on one of these just broke, and I felt this piece of metal fly by my cheek because and one leg went like this. Wow. And I'm hanging by one leg from the crane.
Oh no.
And Ouch. So that gets your heart going.
Yeah, that would start the old engine. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and almost stop it.
Almost stop it. So why don't we continue on into where this skull. This skull-like thing.
Well, this is a better view.
That's
of one of those.
That's a better example.
Oh yes, much. This skull here is the skull of a criminal from the 1500s from Austria. Now, what they would do nowadays, we touch the Bible and swear to give the truth in court. Yes. Back in the day, though, particularly for the witch hunts, they would take a skull, and this one has 3 rows of Christian crosses carved into the top of it to represent Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Right. That was to protect from the evil criminal that probably still dwelled in the skull. It's kind of weird, but they'd put the skull in the cage. It would hang in a courtroom. When giving testimony, you'd put your hand inside and touch it and swear to tell the truth. Now, this worked really well because you take one look at that, you realize, I better tell the truth or I might be in the cage.
This is more compelling than putting your hand on a book.
On a book. Oh, yes. Oh, yes, indeed. Absolutely.
The piece in the case down there that looks like on the handle with the balls with the spikes, what is that called?
That's called a flogging flail.
A flogging flail.
And this thing is particularly nasty.
Yeah.
It would result in total weight loss over time. Yes.
Total weight loss. Yeah.
I have to kid about it because it's too gruesome to talk about. But and this piece down here on the floor, you'll see.
Oh, yes.
It's actually a vice for your lower leg. What a lot of people don't know, they think of the medieval times and they think that atrocities and tortures were running rampant.
Right.
In fact, they weren't.
They weren't.
There was a law, even that doesn't make it any better, but there was a law and there was ways things had to be done.
Right.
And you could only use certain instruments on a person for a certain period of time.
For certain infractions.
To get that confession of truth. The irony of the whole thing is, the way the legal system worked in Europe back then, they couldn't punish you unless they had a confession of guilt.
Of course. And then once they had the confession...
But they got the confession by punishing you.
Right.
And then they punish you. It was kind of funny.
Kind of win-win, lose-lose. Sorry.
That thing's just gnarly. On the inside is all blunted spikes, and it would squeeze together. Oh, yeah. But back to that, and it wasn't used very often. Like, these sorts of things were used for serious crimes to get that confession of guilt. And... you know, if somebody died when you were doing this to them, you could be punished. So the executioner would be
so
punished.
you were culpable even when administering.
Absolutely.
If the torture went too far.
Yep.
Okay.
So they had doctors
Oh.
attend these sessions to make sure that, I know, can you believe it?
Well,
do no harm, right?
A kinder, gentler kind of torture thing. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that looks pretty painful.
There's a lot of history to these things and a lot of interesting traditions in the justice system.
We are at the electric chair.
Yeah, I use this as a bookshelf.
Oh, nice.
It's no disrespect. This chair, of the period, and it was actually made by a former Nebraska State Penitentiary inmate.
Oh, okay.
That when he got free, he made this as a folk art woodworking project. I know, and the only thing I can come up with is this guy must have known people, friends of his went to the chair.
Sure.
Like, why would you do this? But I mean, it is, authentic right down to the nuts and bolts. It's, but this is
So the period that this is a repro of.
You're looking at about 1950s.
About the mid-50s.
1940s,
40s, 50s, yeah. Okay.
But I mean, it's built by a former inmate, and I've looked at pictures of the Nebraska chair, and it's very, very close. So it also makes me wonder if that guy that made this wasn't sweeping up in there or getting the room prepped for when they actually used it, because he'd obviously seen it.
And there's the cap and the belt. Oh.
Yeah. Oh man, it's. I had to put books in it because nobody would sit in it. Nobody wanted to sit in it. I thought it'd be an interesting thing to have, but nobody.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can't blame them.
What we're looking at, believe it or not, is a deck chair from 1912 that was on the Titanic. Steve, would you like to show us the blanket?
Yeah, this is you would have sat in one of these on the deck of the RMS Titanic in April of 1912, covered up in a blanket like that,
right?
Thinking for 4 days, it doesn't get any better than this.
Right.
I mean, you're on the finest ship ever built, and then, of course, disaster struck.
And on that maiden voyage, people would be treated like royalty.
Unless you were in third class.
Unless you were in third class.
But even in third class, many of the people said that it was better than first class in most other ships for them.
Right.
The reason we have this, I've been researching, collecting Titanic for years. I was a consultant to James Cameron's movie. I've authored 2 books on the ship. And my wife and I, we lease out our vast Titanic collection to 2 major museums in Branson, Missouri and Pigeon Forge, Tennessee.
Okay.
They've gone and built the life-size ship down there, up to the second funnel, and it's full of artifacts.
Wow.
So, and this is one of the pieces we have here at home. We have many Titanic pieces still at home here.
So you were obviously interested in the Titanic history long before James Cameron did the movie.
Way before.
What drew you to it?
I was a kid. I was at my cottage in Craigleith, my parents' cottage. It was rainy outside.
Right.
I couldn't go out and play, and my dad said, "Look, there's a movie on TV.
Right.
Sit there, shut up, and watch
the movie."
So I
Don't be a
did.
pain.
Yeah, and it was the classic British film A Night to Remember, which just captivated me. It was one of the earliest Titanic movies.
Yeah.
And I got interested in that, and then many years later, I started to collect anything I could find.
Right.
And I moved out to Halifax, and I was working with an entertainment agency out there.
Right.
And that's where they brought the dead for burial.
That's
and
right.
the museum there at the time had a small collection. They've got a very big collection now, but they had a small collection of some woodwork, and they had a chair. So I thought there must be more of these things. So I started tracking down families that had people on the body recovery ships and buying these things and researching them when nobody cared about Titanic pretty much.
Right, no.
So yeah, we have quite a few pieces.
I mean, before the movie, there was a small interest group, and the movie put it through the stratosphere.
Oh, it did.
And you actually consulted with James Cameron.
The art department of Lightstorm Pictures.
Right?
Yeah. A friend of mine named Ken Marshall, he was the visual historian for the movie. He hooked us up. He said, look, they want pictures of what you have and some measurements, and so they can make their props for the movie. Wow. So it's kind of neat.
Wow.
Yeah, like this was recovered out of the sea with the bodies that were floating about. And what's interesting about this, and we've seen this on a number of other deck chairs that were found from Titanic, there was severe damage here to the footrest, the frame, the seat was blown out.
Right.
So the people that recovered these, they didn't look at these chairs as something that was a treasure or historically important. They said, nice chair, and let's make it serviceable again.
Right, let's fix it.
Yeah, where there was cane here originally, somebody's woven wire here.
Right.
And they've repaired this with screws. So, I mean, it's taking something that if you're on a cable ship earning not very much money, suddenly you have this gorgeous chair, you take it home, you sit on it.
Yeah, yeah.
That's what happened with a lot of these. What we have here is a demitasse saucer, and this is incredibly rare. This was made by Spode Copeland for use, exclusive use in on board the Titanic. And here in the middle, we have the Oceanic Steam Navigation Company logo, which is White Star Line, Titanic's owner's parent name. And it's all trimmed in gold.
Gold.
With raised texture. It's stunning. It's cobalt. Every time I hold it,
it's
I get
beautiful.
afraid I'm going to drop it.
Yeah,
but
no, it's beautiful.
somebody took this off the ship before it sailed. Easy to pocket something like this.
Yeah.
And because of that,
pocketed
it survived. And the only places we've seen these, there's a few other pairs that were pilfered off the ship.
Right.
But the only other place we've seen this pattern is in wreckage raised from the wreck of Titanic,
Right.
2.5 miles down. So they've seen this on the wreck site and they've recovered it.
Yeah, and it wouldn't look like that after 100 years at the bottom of the
No,
ocean.
no. But it's remarkable. It's
Wow,
incredibly
fantastic.
rare. And then this piece here is really amazing. It's something I rather enjoy. This here is a bronze medal.
Yeah.
When Titanic rescued, Carpathia was the ship that rescued Titanic survivors from the lifeboats.
That's right.
And took them to New York City. The unsinkable Molly Brown, or Margaret Brown, who was one of the first class passengers that they saved, she started a drive to have a whip around, collect some money, and then have some medals made to present to the officers and crew of the Carpathia.
Oh.
This is one of those medals.
Oh.
So it's a thank you medal from the survivors of the Titanic.
Including Molly Brown.
Who spearheaded this campaign.
Wow.
To the officers of the Carpathia.
Fantastic.
Oh,
look at that's fantastic.
Amazing things here. Just amazing.
Thank you. Steve, in addition to this, your collection instincts are incredible. What is this document you're holding?
This is rare. This is on vellum. This is from the year 1700. And this is from the county of Essex, which is Massachusetts colony, Salem.
Correct.
And what this is appointment for several of the justices that presided over the witchcraft trials of 1692. This actually outlines their advancement through the court and their new appointments. It's incredibly remarkable because it names them all.
It names them all.
It names them all, and it's got the seal at the bottom of the.
Yes, it does.
Of Essex, and it's just amazing. It's probably one of the earliest Salem pieces that you can get your hands on still.
That is incredible.
Oh yeah, you wouldn't believe what's lurking.
You see history. You don't see and chase darkness.
No, not at all.
You don't chase darkness at all.
Not at all.
You're just examining history and you're collecting what the past is.
Yeah, and chiefly though, I'm interested in lessons. I look around now at the world and the way things are going,
and that those who cannot remember the past are destined to repeat it.
Exactly, and we are walking in those dark hallways again. We are right now, and it's getting worse and worse all the time. And I think there's a lot of people, like I want to have a museum of these things.
Yes, you do.
And I think with a lot of people, the attitude would be, oh, that's politically incorrect. People are going to be traumatized.
The kids are going to have nightmares.
Yeah, exactly. But that's not true.
No.
If you're glorifying these things, you are doing no one any service.
Correct.
But I don't believe that's what I'm intended to do.
And if you're hiding these things,
you're
also doing a disservice. Because if people don't know about it, listen, torture, history, all this dark stuff that's rooted in, forcible darkness and torture and murder, if that stuff isn't studied now,
we're committing the same atrocities. Our technology has changed, but our mindset hasn't. We have look at the Salem thing I'm holding in my hands right now. There's a good example. There were no witches. There never were witches.
There never were.
But what there were a bunch of greedy people that had access to grind with local people in the community.
And power.
And power, and also an ignorant subset that didn't learn, didn't study,
read,
wasn't aware of anything.
And were kept illiterate.
Right. On purpose. So you have the higher ups calling the shots, everyone else living in fear. Well, guess what's happening now?
Same thing.
Right. So I think the greatest way to honor these people is to collect their relics, preserve them for future generations.
Absolutely.
And share them as often as possible. It's more like the quarterdeck of a ship. It's all nautical down here. It's all these cases behind us have things in them from ships and shipwrecks and ocean liner disasters. And here, for instance, is a life jacket that was recovered after the sinking of the Empress of Ireland. Now, a lot of people know about the Titanic, but here in Canada, we had a shipwreck that was worse. The Empress of Ireland was a CP steamship that sank in the St. Lawrence River after colliding with a coal carrier ship. And over 1,000 people died on board.
Whoa.
It was a very warm night and everyone had their portholes open. And when the Norwegian coal carrier hit the side of the Empress of Ireland in a fog, Literally, the ship rolled over, and in 14 minutes, everybody was at the bottom. People hardly had a chance to save themselves.
Oh my!
So this really speaks, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So here we have a variety of different things. There's a dinner plate from the movie, Jim's movie,
Yeah.
Titanic. When it was over, I was given a few pieces by other people that that we decided to keep from the film, props. And there's a prop dinner plate. And in these cases, we have things from all manner of different shipwrecks, and it's quite a place.
And the model in the case just beside you, right there?
Well, that would be of the Titanic.
Right.
Yeah, that's quite a detailed model. And I was really on pins and needles when that shipped here from America because it's so delicate. I was worried it would be smashed, but
Yeah.
it survived. It's so this room, unlike the medieval things,
Yes.
this is not as non-appetizing as
This
it
is
were.
the nautical room.
Yeah, and over here, as a throwback to my Viking heritage, my Norse heritage,
Yes.
which I was telling you about,
Yes.
found out with DNA, we have Norse, Celtic sort of stuff in this corner here. This is great for settling arguments. You know, you just jump up and grab a shield and an axe and you win. It's great.
And they didn't worry about wearing real fur.
No, of course not. Yeah, no PETA back then.
That's right.
Can you imagine?
No, yeah.
Yeah, but it's really cool. So this room is more of a nautical room. Here we have some, seashells, another model of the Titanic. Up here is interesting. This is a piece of the railing from Jim Cameron's Grand Staircase that he made.
Oh.
So when the movie was finished, literally they tore the sets apart and people were able to take certain things. And it's fiberglass, but it looks like wood. And yeah,
It does look like wood.
that's amazing. This here is a deck chair from the Carpathia.
Wow.
The ship that rescued
Right.
the survivors of the Titanic. And it was taken off the Carpathia before the First World War because somebody broke the footrest. And I ended up getting it from the person that it went to. It's a really poignant thing. Well, we had the deck chair from the Titanic. With this, you can almost imagine a widow sitting in this, on that voyage back to New York.
Wondering.
Has a lot of vibes to it.
Oh, yeah.
Knowing that they'd lost their husband
Knowing
or
that
their
they'd lost a family
children,
member,
or
sure.
so it's a pretty heavy piece.
Wow.
New world. We think of Titanic and those liners as opulent for the very rich, and while they did have opulence on them,
Right.
they were really made so big to transport a maximum number of third-class passengers and second-class looking for new life in North
And
America.
with between third and second class, how many passengers do you think a full ship of that caliber would hold?
Geez, that's
about
a good one.
1,000?
More
More than 1,000?
Yeah, more than
Wow.
1,000. They built three.
Right.
The Olympic, the Titanic, and the third one was going to be called Gigantic. But after Titanic sank, they thought,
They scrapped.
let's call it Britannic instead.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, the idea was to get the business away from Cunard Line.
Yeah.
Cunard had the faster ships. White Star said, we'll make the biggest ships, and we'll do it that way. We'll do it in volume.
Carving?
Yeah, it's amazing,
This wood
isn't it?
carving over here looks like it's Norse.
Yeah, it looks very Norse, very Celtic.
Yeah.
That was done by an artist in Hanover, believe
Really?
it or not. He's carved out of a giant slab of cedar.
Really?
Yeah, and we just had to have it when we saw it. It's
Is the
amazing.
imagery Norse or Celtic or what is,
He just took this out of his imagination, and when I walked into his place, I saw it and I said, "Oh my gosh, that's Norse and Celtic."
Yeah.
And he's like, "Oh, I don't know. I just."
It just came out.
Yeah.
Wow.
And yet it's this is almost runic, all these symbols,
Yeah.
and it looks very much that way. It was just a good fit. Good
Good,
fit.
Steve.
Yep.
Thank you so much again for letting us visit you in your home in Grey County.
Thank you very much.
It's quite a collection. Thank you. Not only do we have amazing artifacts from the actual Titanic ship and the White Star Line, but here at Steve Santini's miraculous collection in Grey County. Here is a world-class museum of artifacts from hundreds and hundreds of years. Medieval torture, justice, so-called justice, and all of the rest. Right, Iron Maiden? Right. You don't see this stuff very often, folks, but if you just scratch the surface of someone, you find some pretty interesting interests, hobbies, and vocations. I'm Joel Axler. Catch us on Whiteman TV every Monday at 6 p.m. It's all about you.